Welcome, denizens of the night, to Fangs After Dark. Tonight, we will turn the page on the Storyteller's Apocrypha, where we discuss tips, tricks, advice, concepts, and things to help storytellers and players in their games of Vampire the Masquerade, 5th edition or other editions, as a lot of the tips I give are edition agnostic for the most part. As always, remember that this is not an exhaustive list and do whatever is best for your gaming table. Tonight, we will be discussing 5 tips on city building for Vampire the Masquerade. Enjoy, and hopefully you'll find these tips useful. Number 1, decide what kind of city fits the themes of your game. Obviously, every game and every chronicle has some sort of theme that the storyteller wants to set for when they are running the game. And picking a city, if you're going with a real life city, can be very crucial in how those themes are reflected. You know, if you're setting a chronicle in a rundown, economically declining city, it can lend itself well to gritty street level violent stories, redemption, building up, and it's a great reflection of urban decay in juxtaposition to the degradation of morality in vampires, as opposed to like a city that's like rife with money, lush with opportunity, and brimming with politics. A city like that would be a great city for a more politically Machiavellian style game. Conflicts with, you know, gaining resources, power struggles of lineage and family wealth, things like that will fit really well in a rich city. And if you need examples of the two, like a city that you could consider economically declining and most famously known for is Detroit, right? So when the motor industry decided to pull out, the city just went into rapid decline. And, you know, modern times it's going through kind of a resurgence and a rebuilding. But it's one of the biggest examples we have of like a large city that has gone downhill rapidly due to economic strife. And then obviously if you want to think of like a city that's super rich and super successful, super full of money, you can obviously, New York City is a great example of that, Dubai, things like that. Just kind of think about those cities and how they kind of represent the theme of the story that you want to tell. And obviously in the world of darkness, every city is going to seem gritty and shitty because it's world of darkness, right? It's a horribly dark reflection of the real world. But those aspects still exist within the cities of the world. So always keep that in mind when you're picking a city. Number 2, research your city. Obviously, this goes without saying. I think everybody knows this, but I think it still needs to be mentioned and talked about because there are a lot of tools to being able to research, and I think a lot of people can feel very stuck when they feel like they have to research a city in depth, and they get this paralysis by analysis. They feel very overwhelmed because of all the different facets and tools and things that are within a city. But you don't have to kill yourself in researching a city, but it is worth doing. If you're picking a city that you're not familiar with for your games, you know, you can look into its history, look at its timelines, look at the events that took place that formed the city the way it was, when the city was founded, who founded the city, you know, why does the city have the name it has, you know. You can look at key locations for a city, like what are the most happening places, where's City Hall, where's the hottest nightclubs, what do the restaurants look like, you know. You can look at the neighborhoods, which neighborhoods are really rough and horrible, which neighborhoods are really affluent and pretty. You know, you can look up key individuals within the city, famous people that might live there or might frequent there. You can look up videos of people walking the streets at night, you know, kind of like a virtual tourism, which I highly recommend. because you can find videos on YouTube and other, video hosting sites of people walking around cities, But if you go out of your way and look for virtual touring websites, you'll find a lot of people, locals to those cities, that for a nominal fee will actually take a group of people on a virtual tour through the city. And they'll actually give commentary on like the history of the places that they're going to. You know, they'll talk about the architecture, the significance of the places that they're visiting. And it's like you're right there with them, virtually just watching and looking at these awesome places that you might otherwise be barred from going to due to money or other, you know, situations in your life. I personally have used virtual tourism to research, and I just personally like seeing places that I have, you know, a hard time getting to. You know, I work full time. I don't make like an insane amount of money, so it's not like I can just go on trips all the time. But so like virtual tourism is a great way to experience places that you've never seen, and it's also a really, really, really awesome tool for researching a city that you will plan on using for some of your games. Another tool is like Google Street Maps is a great way to kind of like peruse the streets of a city you're unfamiliar with at your leisure and kind of get a feel for everything. And I guarantee you, putting the effort into researching the city is going to come out so much more in your games than you realize. It'll be expressed vibrantly. The city will feel more alive, and you and your players will be better off for it. I can guarantee it. So don't be afraid, dig in, and learn the city, man. It's worth doing, I guarantee it. Number 3, how many kindred should be in a city? The population density of kindred and kind is a relatively important aspect to any city. Too many kindred will cause a lot of things to happen as more and more people go missing, are found dead, or report to the hospital with, you know, chronic anemia. This is a perfect storm for like hunter plots and things like that. But if you're not wanting to run something like that, at least not right away, you can be a bit more balanced. And the rule of thumb from what I've researched is 1 kindred per 100,000 mortals, right? So, you know, if you have a city of like 1.5 million, you would have somewhere up to like 24 mortals, something like that. But I've seen the range be anywhere from like 65k per 1 kindred to, you know, 100k per 1 kindred. I personally like to stick with the 1 vampire per 7,500. That's the number that I think feels good to me. It lets me have my key SPCs that I need for the story, and it also lets me have like a grab bag of nameless vampires that I can throw in for whatever reason without causing a jarring feeling of all of a sudden there's like a whole new set of vampires in the city that was never talked about or heard of before, and it should be causing problems, but somehow it didn't, because some players will pick up on that kind of thing. So that's what I like to stick by. It's really up to the storyteller for their table though, because it's your world of darkness. You can run it how you want to, but it's a good guideline to kind of give people an idea of like what the balance should be for their city, because obviously you can't have too many kindred running around without it, you know, logically causing any problems. And in a huge city, having a small amount of kindred, you know, that can work too, depending on the story. But it's not really an exact science, so play around with it and see what feels good for you and your table. Number 4, speaking of population, let's talk about who inhabits your city. Now, this tip is less about city building and more about like the function of the city. This is where things can get really diverse, since who resides in the city depends heavily on the kind of game you're running in Vampire the Masquerade. I'm sure everyone that's read any sort of vampire or played any sort of vampire or did anything understands the concept of Camarilla, Anarch, Sabbat, Independent, whatever kind of games. And the kind of game you're running is going to be affecting the city that you are running it in. So you really have to decide that before you kind of set up your city. At least you have to decide what the initial focus is, right? Vampire sects influence the composition of the Kindred in the city heavily. If you are running a mix of sects, what parts of the city are they in control of? Generally, Camarilla control the more upscale, well-off parts of the city because they have more influence. The financial districts, the touristy areas, etc. Anarchs and Sabbat typically hold the lesser parts of the city, like the slums, bad neighborhoods, industrial areas. Setting these things up will allow you to define who's in power, the key SPCs that your players have to deal with, and potential antagonists. The biggest tip I can offer for this, though, is only define the Kindred that your players will interact with initially. What is the first story plot, the first arc, or what have you going to focus on? Create those SPCs first, and then put them where they need to be. And then you can obviously sprinkle in any relationships that might be relevant here and there, and you can build these SPCs as the story progresses. Sometimes it's really nice to bounce off the players' reactions, because sometimes they can make really awesome assumptions that you might sit back and say, oh man, that's actually better than what I was thinking, and then you can take that and adapt it. So, don't over-prepare, but you want to have your key NPCs set within your city, depending on the kind of game you're running. But, have fun with it, and obviously if you are the kind of person that enjoys creating your entire city cast right away, and you go into detail about everything, then you do you. I mean, that's an awesome amount of preparation, and I tip my hat to whoever does that kind of thing, because it takes an intensely high amount of time to do, and to do it well, and it definitely comes out when you play games that has this kind of preparation preset. And I don't come up with every single key Kindred that's in a position in the city. Like I said, I like to focus on the Kindred that are going to be interacted with, but I always have an idea of who is where, even if it's just a base, note of who the Anarch Baron is, what their name is, what clan they are, and a basic motivation. Things like that, And then as the story progresses and the players do what they do, they make their decisions, I start developing things as they need. It's easier for me. But like I said, if you like to create everything right off the rip and have an entire spreadsheet, then have at it. I think that's awesome. Number 5. Look at the published city sourcebooks, old and new, for Vampire the Masquerade. Vampire the Masquerade already has a good amount of city books that are published with everything you might need to run a game within that setting, from older editions to V5. You could even use books from other vampire systems like Requiem. City building is not something that's necessarily specific to only one kind of system if it's all in the World of Darkness, you know what I mean? You can use older editions or the most current, because in a game of vampires, old and new, time is irrelevant. You can go back in time and see how a city was, and maybe, a second edition Vampire the Masquerade city source book might have better information on a city for that time. Things like that. Maybe you want to run a game in 1975 Chicago. The older edition versions of Chicago by Night will have details that you might want for an older timeline for that city. You might want a game set in 2018 where the players are trying to actively stop the Lasombra joining the Camarilla. The V5 Chicago by Night book has you covered on details regarding Chicago in the most modern nights. The Storyteller's Vault also has a crap ton of source books created by fans for cities that are not covered by official publications, which are also a really good thing to look at, really good tools to use, and you get to support the community on top of that, which is also a huge bonus. it can cut out a lot of work if you just look at the city source books that are already out. And you don't have to use everything in a source book either. If you want to use X plot, but you want to use your own SPCs, go for it. If you want to use a certain event, but you want to change up what happens, do it. All that information is there, all that detail and the characters and everything is all kind of pre-made for you depending on what source book you're using, which is a super godsend when real life cities have so much fluff, so much history rich in information that can really cause people to kind of put themselves off from researching it. But we're lucky enough to have source books from all over the place that can give us a head start in our own creative endeavors for our games. So don't be afraid to take advantage of them. You can pick and choose whatever you want from these books. You're not tied to anything specific in them. You don't have to ask the big daddy company for permission to use certain things. They are tools. Use them. They are invaluable, and your players and yourself will thank you. I'm telling you. Those were 5 tips on city building for our World of Darkness. Now, remember, these tips can be used across all games within the World of Darkness, as the city in which the denizens of the night reside are varied just as much as the supernatural creatures that reside within them. So always remember to treat your city as a character in itself, and you will not fail to provide an immersive and rich experience for your games in the World of Darkness. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you didn't, there's a button for that too. I'll see you guys next time, and remember, nothing good ever happens after dark.